We'll be dealing with 2 Chronicles chapter 36. If I can ask you to consider a few questions before we actually get into the evening. How many of you know something about your dads? Like our dads, our physical dads. We know something about them, right? We probably have, many of us have some facts about them. Some of us more than others, certainly. Let me change the question a little bit. What about our grandfathers? How much do you guys know about your grandfathers? Probably a little bit less than your fathers for most of us. What if I make it a little bit harder and say your great-grandfathers? How much do you know about your great-grandfathers? Yeah, probably a lot less. I can tell you for me, of my two great-grandfathers, I know about one thing about them. Well, one thing about the one guy. I think I know pretty much his name and when he came to Africa. That's about it. How about your great-great-grandfathers? Do we know anything about those dudes? Probably not very much, I presume. I'm sure you're all wondering why Donnie Vas is taking us down this rabbit trail. Well, think about 2 Chronicles chapter 35, verse 25 for a second. Therein we have the death of a king by the name of Josiah, which of course we met last week and the week before. And we see there that they lamented for him. And they said there was laments until this day. That's very interesting, because Chronicles is written roughly 200 years after Josiah had died. Brethren, we knew very little about our great-grandfathers. We know something of our grandfathers. Here's a guy that was 200 years after the fact. And they were weeping and mourning, or as it says, they were lamenting even till this day. And so we see in Josiah a dude that made an incredible impact for the kingdom. An incredible impact, such that the people were still mourning those 200 years later. He is that good king, that Davidic king, the king that we would have all wanted in a way. And of course that sets us up here for the last 4 kings that we will meet in chapter 36, who aren't so good. And so we see Josiah there, the wonderful good king, the Davidic-like king, David-like, like Hezekiah, good king. And then of course we're going to meet these 4 guys in quick succession here in chapter 36 before we go into the exile, which happens and takes us into Babylon. And so read with me, if you will. We are in verses 1 through 4. We're meeting our first king, Jehoahaz. It says this: Then the people of the land took Jehoahaz, the son of Josiah, and made him king in his place of his father in Jerusalem. And Jehoahaz was 23 years old when he became king, and he reigned there 3 months in Jerusalem. Then the king of Egypt deposed him at Jerusalem and imposed upon the land a fine of 100 talents of silver and 1 talent of gold. The king of Egypt made Eliakim his brother king over Judah and Jerusalem, and changed his name to Jehoiakim. But Necho took Jehoahaz his brother and brought him to Egypt. Very familiar in Chronicles by now. You have noticed that it tells us his age. We see that he reigned for a very short time, just 3 short months. We see that he was deposed by Necho, the Pharaoh. Of course, we had met Necho in the chapter of 35 when he killed Josiah in battle. And of course, we see that there's a tax imposed on him, right? A vassal. They had become a vassal state. They were under the authority of Egypt now. So they had to pay a tax, if you will, imposed on them by the king. And we see there it is 100 talents of silver and 1 talent of gold, which means a great deal to all of us today, I know. Let me explain a little bit what it is. 100 talents of silver would have roughly been about 6,730 pounds. For those of you like me who like to use the word ton, it's about 3 tons. It also says that it's 1 talent of gold, which is roughly 67 pounds of gold. I thought I'd better give you just an estimated value here really quickly of what that must have cost. Try 1.1 million for the gold, that's the 1 talent, and try about 162,000 odd, give or take some, for the silver. So, of course, we see these guys getting imposed upon, a tax upon them. I know many of you will probably remember Hezekiah. He had to pay a tax too to the king of Assyria, and you'd be right in saying that. And when we look at how much Hezekiah, and in his day they had to pay, you'll see that it was significantly more than what this king had to pay here. 2 Kings chapter 18, verses 14 through 17, really deals with that topic. It says, Then Hezekiah, king of Judah, sent to a king of Assyria at Lachish, saying, I have done wrong. Withdraw from me whatever you impose on me, I will bear. And so the king of Assyria required of King Hezekiah, king of Judah, 300 talents of silver and 30 talents of gold. And so Hezekiah gave him, it tells us there in verse 15, 300 talents of gold, 300 talents of silver, which is about 30 times more than what they had to pay at this time for Necho. And of course, 30 talents of gold, 30 times the amount of gold. Why is it, do you think, that there was such a steep decline in the amount taxed or imposed upon them? I like to think that perhaps it might have reference to thinking that Hezekiah, and in his day the prosperity and the blessings that flowed from the Lord at that time, in all the good reigns, we see that God seems to bless those kings, bless the people of those times. And we see an abundance of blessing in Hezekiah's time. The king of Assyria knew this, and he goes, okay, well, you're able to give X. We're going to take exactly that from you. We're going to take a lot from you. We come to see this king here, Jehoahaz, and we see that we're told that he's not a very good king. We're told that he does evil, actually, like many of the other kings. And of course, there's curses that go on with that, as Deuteronomy tells us. And of course, it may well be that there was a decline already going on. And we see the decline morally, but we see a decline possibly here in the physical as well, in the economic sense of it. And so we see they are imposed on a slightly smaller, or on a smaller taxation. Jeremiah chapter 22, we'll be dealing with a lot of Jeremiah in our teaching this evening, because a lot of the kings that we meet up here, Jeremiah is ministering at this time. We will even a little bit touch in Ezekiel. You will even see a little bit of Daniel. But here's Jeremiah chapter 22, referencing the death firstly of Josiah, but more specifically his son. Here's what he says in Jeremiah 22, verses 10 through 12. It says, Do not weep for the dead or mourn for him. Because we remember there was incredible mourning for Josiah when he died, right? Do not weep for that king, but weep continually for the one who goes away, for he will never return or see his native land. And so we see that's his son. Weep for the one who goes away and will never return to see his land. This king, Jehoahaz, may well have been, the people may well have thought, well, Necho has taken him to Egypt, perhaps he will come back. Jeremiah is saying, brethren, it's not going to happen that way. He is going and he will not come back. Weep and mourn for him. Verse 4, we also meet this dude by the name of Eliakim. This is our second king. Of course, we know him more commonly as Jehoiakim. We see here verse 4. Eliakim, his brother, king of Judah, became king. And of course, Necho puts him there. We'll read verses 5 through 7 together, and we'll touch on Jehoiakim's reign. It says, Jehoiakim was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned 11 years in Jerusalem, and he did evil in the sight of the Lord. Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came up against him and bound him with bronze chains to take him to Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar also brought some of the articles of the house of the Lord to Babylon and put them in his temple at Babylon. Now the rest of the acts of Jehoiakim and the abominations which he did, and what was found against him, behold, they are written in the book of the kings of Israel and Judah. And Jehoiachin, his son, becomes king in his place. So we see this king Jehoiakim first, right? Jehoiakim. We see there 25 years old, as usual. And we see that he reigns 11 years in Jerusalem. We see that his name is changed. His name was Eliakim. We see him now known as Jehoiakim. Why did the king of Egypt or the Pharaoh do that? Why did he do that? Well, the reason is very good. If you want to show someone in the ancient Near Eastern world that you have power over them, you want to show them that you have authority over them, guess what you do? You firstly impose, they're a vassal. That means they are under your control. They are a nation under your power. You are the suzerain. You are the power that is above them, the suzerain, and the vassal is that nation under you. But you change your name. You change his name because you're taking ownership of him. Think about Genesis chapter 2 for a quick second. We remember back in the day that Adam is in the Garden of Eden, right? We remember that. And God says to him, take dominion over the garden. And God says, name the creatures in the garden. It was part of the dominion that Adam and Eve were going to have over the earth and over the animals. Him taking ownership or dominion over them, rulership over them, and naming them. So when somebody is giving you a name, we think of us today. Our parents gave us names, right? We are under their authority in a sense that way. We didn't choose our names, though some of us in later times may well take on another name. But we were under their authority. A symbol of that, in a sense, is the naming. It's also why we tell little kids sometimes, these little kids sometimes, when we were little kids, and sometimes the not-so-little kids like us, we're the big kids. Sometimes the little kids have a proclivity to call other kids names. And we say to them, little kid, young one, you ought not to do that. Why ought you not to do that? Call that person that name and that name and that name. You don't have that authority over them. And so when little kids are calling each other's names, when we're calling people names and giving them labels, we're in a sense trying to assert our authority over them. And that's why we tell little kids, little ones, refrain from that. They were given a name. It's not just whomever, somebody. That person has a name. And so we see Necho renaming him Jehoiakim. He is under our authority. We are going to change his name. He is under our thumb. He is our puppet. He will do what we say. Jehoiakim is a puppet king. Or you can think of others in the Bible who have had their names changed, Abraham or Sarah. God was giving them a new identity. So, for those of us who have kids, watch out for our name calling. The Lord has given us names. I remember the one time I was in college, and there was a girl that we were an acquaintance with, I guess is the best word. And very often I would walk by her or something, and I knew her name, but sometimes I wouldn't call her name. I would just say, hey friend, how you doing? And I didn't mean that in a negative or pejorative sense, like I don't know your name or I don't wish to refer to you. But one day she said to me, hey, my name is, please would you call me that? I think that was pretty bold of her. And I was like, yeah, I did know your name was that. I just thought I was changing it up. But we have names, and the Lord has given us names. So let's use them. Proverbs chapter 10, verse 27. We see here this king doesn't reign very long, 11 years. Proverbs 10:27 says, the fear of the Lord, it prolongs days, but the years of the wicked shall be shortened. We saw the first king, he reigned 3 months. The second king, he reigned 11 years. We're going to see the third king, Jehoiachin, come. Of course, long life is something of a blessing from the Lord, especially in the Old Testament. God wants us to see that as perhaps a blessing. Yet, of course, we have passages like Psalm chapter 90 where Moses says, teach me to number my days that we may present to you a heart of wisdom. So long life is not, or desiring long life is not such a bad thing, but let's be careful with the life that we have and let's use it fruitfully, right? Those guys had their opportunities, 3 months or 11 years. James 4:14 says, you do not know, yet you do not know what your life will be like tomorrow. You are just a vapor that appears for a while and then vanishes away. Those kings had their lives, in a sense, cut short. We have a certain amount of time given to us, and that's it. Psalm 39, just to give you one more, verse 4. Lord, make me to know my end, and what is the extent of my days. Let me know how transient I am. We pick there in verse 8, and we notice In verse 6 and verse 7, we see Nebuchadnezzar come. We see that he comes up against him. We see that this probably happened roughly 605 BC, Nebuchadnezzar first coming to the people of Jerusalem and taking things back to Babylon. Of course, we also see Jehoiachin becoming the king. That's the son. During that first deportation is when we believe the man we know as Daniel. Daniel, the guy in the lion's den, that guy, Daniel. We believe this is when Daniel was taken to the land of Babylon. It was during this first deportation. And we will see in the book, in the chapter, a couple more deportations coming. So Daniel chapter 1, if you wanted to notice that for your own reference, you can. Verse 8 tells us that his acts were very abominable. And again, of course, we have reference to the book of the Kings, which, if you would like this parallel story, you can find there. In verses 9 and 10, we get to deal with this guy called Jehoiachin, the son of Jehoiakim. It says, at the end of the year, King Nebuchadnezzar sent him and brought him to Babylon. Oy. Brethren, I'm sorry. I missed out verse 9. Let me get that for you. It says, Jehoiachin was 8 years old when he became king, and he reigned 3 months and 10 days in Jerusalem, and he did evil in the sight of the Lord. At the turn of the year, King Nebuchadnezzar sent and brought him to Babylon with the valuable articles of the house of the Lord, and he made his kinsman Zedekiah king over Judah and Jerusalem. And so we see this guy, Jehoiachin, literally just a couple of verses on him. We see that he reigned a very, very short time as well. 3 months. Notice that first king that we met in the chapter, 3 months. This third king, 3 months. The second king, 11 years. So this guy reigns just 3 months. Of course, it very quickly tells us there that he did evil in the sight of the Lord, unfortunately. And of course, 2 Kings chapter 20 gives us a prophetic word. Starting here in these verses, preceding us in verses 6, 7, and of course Jehoiachin as well is part of this prophetic word that is being played out. And of course by the end of the chapter we will see the prophetic word fully played out. Notice this one in 2 Kings chapter 20. It says, Then Isaiah said to Hezekiah, Hear the word of the Lord. Behold, the days are coming, when all that is in your house and all that your fathers have laid up and stored to this day will be carried to Babylon. Nothing will be left, says the Lord. Some of your sons who shall issue from you, whom you shall beget, will be taken away, and they will become officials in the palace of the king of Babylon. So we see this prophetic word even here, that the king of Babylon is coming. He's taking and he's plundering and taking people and things back to Babylon. We see a very, very short reign of Jehoiachin. Perhaps I can just enlighten you and just remind you of Jeremiah chapter 52. You pick up Jehoiachin's life again at the end of Jeremiah 52, which is right at the end of Jeremiah. You can pick up Jehoiachin and see what happens to him in the land of Babylon. The king actually, Merodach, after Nebuchadnezzar, decides, you know what, this king, I'm going to show him favor. And he actually lets him come to eat at his table. So we see that Jehoiachin, his rule is ended. He's taken to Babylon, and of course in Jeremiah 52. That's where you can reference the end of his story. Verse 10 tells us that his kinsman, Zedekiah, is made king. Again, we see some of your translations might say kinsman or uncle, but the idea is certainly that it was his uncle. If you reference or look at 1 Chronicles chapter 3, you will notice that Zedekiah is actually a son of Josiah, which means that he is an uncle to this guy. I think that's what we get. We see the name change again here. We see the name being changed by the king of Babylon. You can reference that in 2 Kings chapter 24. Of course, the king of Babylon wants to be in control. He has control of these people. He changes this dude's name. Of course, we've already referenced that story about name changing and that sort of thing. There's an incredible prophecy about this guy, Zedekiah, and he's the guy we're going to spend the majority of the rest of our time with, Zedekiah. Really incredible. Really, really, really incredible prophecy coming from Jeremiah and, of course, from Ezekiel. Have you ever wanted to see the sovereignty of God played out? We're going to see it here in a few verses. I remember one of my professors in school, he once told us, listen, brethren, there's two things in your life, or there's a couple of things in your life as a Christian you need to get squared away in your own heart and mind. He said the first one of these things is the sovereignty of God, that God is sovereign and things that happen in your life and my life aren't just willy-nilly. They aren't just happenstance. The sovereignty of God. The other one he said was, be sure of your salvation. Do you know that you know that you know that you're saved? Because if you have those two things in place, when the things that come before you come, you have something very solid under you. You know the sovereignty of God in your life, and you know that you're one of His. And that puts you in great position to handle anything that comes before you. So we'll get into Zedekiah. Let me read these two prophetic words for you because we will tie them back in at the end of tonight. Chapter 34 of Jeremiah, verse 3 says this, you will not escape from his hand, for you will surely be captured and delivered into his hand. You will see the king of Babylon eye to eye, and he will speak with you face to face, and you will go to Babylon. Yet hear the word of the Lord, O Zedekiah, king of Judah. Thus says the Lord concerning you, you will not die by the sword, you will die in peace. And spices were burned for your fathers, the former kings who were before you, so they will burn spices for you, and they will lament for you. Alas, Lord, for I have spoken the word, declares the Lord. That's the one prophecy. Keep that one in mind, Jeremiah. Notice that it says that he will see the king of Babylon face to face. You will speak with him. You will see him. You will die in peace. Ezekiel 12, verse 13 says this. It's another prophetic word given. I will also spread my net over him, and he will be caught in my snare, and I will bring him to Babylon in the land of the Chaldeans. Yet he will not see it, though he will die there. This is in reference, of course, again to Zedekiah. These are two words that maybe Zedekiah would have well been familiar with at this time. We don't know exactly, but he may well have been. So let's pick up the book or the man that we know as Zedekiah. We'll be dealing with verses 11 through 14 here. It says Zedekiah was 21 years old and when he became king, and he reigned 11 years in Jerusalem. He did evil in the sight of the Lord his God, and he did not humble himself before Jeremiah the prophet, who spoke for the Lord. He also rebelled against Nebuchadnezzar, who had made him swear allegiance by God. But he stiffened his neck, and he hardened his heart against turning to the Lord God of Israel. Furthermore, all the officials of the priests and the people who were very unfaithful, following all the abominations of the nations, and they defiled the house of the Lord, which he had sanctified in Jerusalem. So we see this guy here, Zedekiah. Verse 11, of course, we see it's an 11-year reign. Of course, Chronicles always tells us how long they reigned in general. Verse 12 tells us he does evil. The terrible refrain continues, and he did evil in the sight of the Lord. The refrain continues. And verse 12 tells us that he did not humble himself. He was prideful, yeah? He refused to listen to God's voice. I should like to bring you to a book of the Bible that we generally don't go to, but tonight we will. Let's go to the book of Obadiah. We will read verses 3 and 4 together. Obadiah is generally referencing, in the context of Obadiah, he's talking to the land or the people of Edom. But it has great application here, so I shall use it here slightly in its out of usual context. It says, the arrogance of your heart has deceived you, and you will live in the clefts of the rock, in the loftiness of your dwelling place, who say in your heart, who will bring me down to earth? Though you build high like the eagle, though you set your nest among the stars, for there I will bring you down, declares the Lord. So we see in this man, in a sense, he refused to humble himself. He was prideful. The arrogance of your heart has deceived you. And that's what happens when pride gets into our hearts, right? It kind of deceives us and we kind of overlook things that we would otherwise quite pay attention to. The arrogance of your heart has deceived you. But notice the result of this. Though you set your nest high among the stars, though you think you may be getting away, guess what? From there I will bring you down, declares the Lord. Interestingly, it's kind of what happens with our man Zedekiah here. Verse 13 says, he rebels against Nebuchadnezzar. And we see that he stiffens his neck, which means he is stubborn and not easily led. And of course, he hardens his heart, which, of course, you can hear the incredible echoes from the time of the Pharaoh and Exodus. Let me just illustrate for you really quickly how this stiffening of the neck thing image comes, because it's pretty common in the Bible, and of course, even in the New Testament, we will see that image being used. But it says, he stiffened his neck. What on earth does that mean? Well, back in the day, they would be plowing the fields, and they would have 2 oxen moving in a direction, and the plowman would be at the back, and he would be controlling the plow, making sure it's going where he wants it to go, yeah? Then he would have a stick or a pole in his hand, and he would have a little metal spike on the end, right? And so if he wanted the cows or the cows to go a little bit faster, just give them a little prick on the back of the leg, and they know, hey, forward, 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 let's go, let's go. If he wanted them to turn to the left, he would prick them in the neck, right? Go left. You want to pick them, you wanted to go right, pick them here, they go this way. So the image here is very simply like that plowman pricking that cow in the neck to say go left or go right. If that cow was stubborn, obstinate, refused to listen, not easily led, they were called stiff-necked. Of course, we see that in this man, this image that is borrowed and now used in the Bible. The people were stiff-necked. They refused to listen to God's instruction. Of course, I know that doesn't happen to us today, so I know I'm preaching just to the choir here. But of course it does, right? We all know better. We all do that from time to time. We all get that stiff neck. Sometimes we aren't as quick to receive that rebuke, that word of correction. Just for your reference, Acts chapter 7, verses 51, Acts 7:51, Stephen uses this image, and he uses it in reference to the people of the leaders of the time, the Jewish people, Jewish leaders at the time. It says, "You men are stiff-necked and are uncircumcised in heart and ears, always resisting the Holy Spirit, and you are doing just as your father had done." This image of stiff-neckedness and stubbornness, which frankly, if we're honest with ourselves, sometimes is in our hearts as well. Sometimes in very overt ways, sometimes less overt ways. We also see that he hardened his heart. Of course, here echoes of the Pharaoh, Exodus times, right? Pharaoh hardened his heart. The Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart. We'll reference just a couple of passages for you. Exodus 8:15, "But when Pharaoh saw that there was relief, he hardened his heart and did not listen to them, as the Lord had said." Exodus 9, verse 12, "But the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, and he did not listen to them, as the Lord had spoken to Moses." What do we do about this, brethren? 1 Timothy 4 says that sometimes we can get a seared conscience, right? Where we go in living in a place where we are not as sensitive to the sin that we once were. There's a solution to this, of course, because we can all become a little hard-hearted and stiff-necked. We can all become that, no matter where we are in our walk with the Lord. Take some counsel from Proverbs chapter 28, verse 13 through 14. "Whoever conceals his transgressions will not prosper, but he who confesses and forsakes them will obtain mercy. Blessed is the one who fears the Lord always, but whoever hardens his heart will fall into calamity." We see the result again of a hard heart, calamity. Of course, we see in verse 14, the officials and the leaders are also negatively influenced. They act very unfaithfully. We also see that they defile the house of the Lord, going against directly, of course, God's presence among the people. That was the temple, the representation of God's presence with the people. How ought God to react to all of this? How should he react to this? Verses 15 says this, "And then the Lord, the God of their fathers, sent word to them again and again by his messengers, because he had compassion on his people and on his dwelling place. But they continually mocked the messengers of God and despised his words and scoffed at the prophets until the wrath of the Lord arose against his people and there was no remedy." Verse 15. God sends again and again. His prophets go again and again. God's hand is reached out towards them again and again. He hasn't given up on them. We see in this the reason is because God is a God of incredible compassion for his people. Exodus chapter 34, 6 and 7 says, "And the Lord passed in front of him and proclaimed, the Lord God, compassionate and gracious, slow to anger and abounding in loving kindness and truth, who keeps loving kindness for thousands, who forgives iniquity, transgression, and sin." The good news is that God who held his hand out to those people in that day of Zedekiah is still holding his hand out towards us and towards the people in the world today. He is still holding his hand out. He is still reaching out to them. Permit me, if you will, to read a little excerpt that illustrates for you the heart of the Father. I could try and tell you it, but it's expressed very well as it's written here. It says, "On December the 7th, 1988, an earthquake devastated the northwestern section of Armenia, killing an estimated 25,000 people." Check this story out. It says, "In one small town just after the earthquake, a father rushed to his son's school only to find that the school had been flattened. There was no sign of life, but he had thought of no turning back. He had often told his son, 'No matter what, I'll always be there for you when you need me.' Though his prospects seemed hopeless, the father began feverishly removing rubble where he believed his son's classroom had been. Other forlorn parents only waited hopelessly. 'My son,' or 'my daughter.' Some told the father to go home, that there was no chance that any children could be alive. And yet he replied, 'I made my son a promise that I'd be there for him any time he needed me, and so I must continue to dig.' Courageously he worked alone, for no one volunteered to help him. He simply had to know for himself, is my boy alive or is he dead? Finding strength and endurance beyond himself, the faithful, loving father continued to dig for 8 hours, 12 hours, 24 hours, 36 hours. And then in the 38th hour, as he heaved away a heavy piece of rubble, he heard voices. 'Armand!' he screamed. A child's voice responded, 'Dad, it's me, Armand.' And then I told the other kids not to worry. I told them that if you were alive, and when you'd say you would come and save me, you promised you'd always be there for me. And you did it, Dad.' Moments later, the dad was helping his son Armand and 13 more frightened, hungry, thirsty boys and girls climb out of the debris, free at last. And when the building collapsed, or because the building collapsed, these children had been spared in a tent-like pocket. That's the heart of the Father, brethren. That's the heart of the Father, not just in the days of Zedekiah. It's the heart of the Father today, for you and for me. That Father wouldn't be discouraged. He wouldn't be deterred by the rubble, nobody else helping, the tiredness of his hands. What must his hands have felt like digging through that rubble? What must his back have felt like digging through that? Such is the heart of our Father towards us even today. Of course, you're thinking of the prodigal son probably, and the heart of the Father that is still always for his children, and you'd be right. There's incredible compassion in the Father's heart for us. We see compassion here as the driving force of why God does what he does. Man, he has incredible compassion for us. Incredible compassion for us. There's incredible softness in his heart towards his people. That even though we may reject him or take a longer time to get there, that compassion, that tenderness of heart is still there in him. Of course, we see compassion in Jesus, right? Mark's gospel. I feel compassion for the people because they've remained with me for 3 days now and have nothing to eat. Compassion. His heart towards us is compassion. And of course, I think for us, I hope when you hear us teach and live out this life, that there's compassion expressed towards one another. Because we all know Jesus showed us compassion. We ought to show others compassion. There might be a name on your head or in your mind already this person I need to show compassion to. I don't know who it is in your head and your heart, but if you need to show compassion, go for it. You're showing the heart of the Father. You're showing the heart of Jesus. How would they react to this heart of compassion of the Father? How would you react? I remember asking my little kids in Zim one day, hey, what would you do if somebody did all these wrong things to you? Oh, they were ready to tell me. Oh, they were telling me, oh, I would do this, that, and the other. I was like, brethren, that's what we did to the Father. And they're like, oh, the one kid says to me, what are we going to do? That's a great question. What are we going to do? But how would these people react? Verse 16 tells us that they mocked his messengers, despised his words, and scoffed at his prophets. I don't know what you and I would do if somebody did that to us. I'm just trying to tell you what the Lord has for you, brother. The Lord loves you and cares for you. Verse 16, just to give you a new NLT translation. Until the Lord's anger could no longer be restrained and nothing could be done. The wrath of the Lord was there and there was no remedy. There was nothing to help. There was nothing to heal. Proverbs 29 verse 1, I love this one, it's pretty good. A man who hardens his neck after much reproof will be broken beyond remedy. Ephesians chapter 2:12 could tell us this. When you and I we were at one time without God in this world, and that means we were without hope. If we don't have the Lord in our lives, brethren, we don't have hope. We don't. Hope in the Bible is a fixed, strong conviction of God's love or God's victory coming. Hope. Without the Lord, you and I don't have it. You and I have a temporal hope. I hope the Cowboys will win this weekend. It's a temporal thing. But there's a strong conviction in the biblical hope, because biblical hope is different to the one that we have in this world. It's a strong confidence. It's not based on a whim. Verses 17 through 19, we have a cataclysmic event in Old Testament history, of course. I try and think of other events that are hugely important in the Old Testament. Of course, the Exodus comes to mind. We can think of the construction of the temple. But I think in the minds of the Jews, one of the cataclysmic events also has to be the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple here. The first temple built by David and, of course, Solomon. And that's what we see here. And that prophecy given by Isaiah to Hezekiah, we see its fulfillment coming in part here. Verses 17, it says this. Therefore he brought up against them the king of the Chaldeans, who slew their young men with the sword in the house of their sanctuary, and had no compassion on young man or virgin, man or infirm, and he gave them into his hand. All the articles of the house of God, great and small, the treasures of the house of the Lord, the treasures of the king of his offices, he brought them all to Babylon. And then he burned the house of God and broke down the wall of Jerusalem, and burned all its fortified buildings with fire, and destroyed all its valuable articles. There's an incredible destruction here pictured. Just for your frame of reference, this is the destruction of Jerusalem, 586. It's recorded in 4 other places in the Old Testament. You can check it out in 2 Kings 25 here, of course, Jeremiah chapter 39, 1 through 14, and you can check it out in Jeremiah 52. Such was the event that it made its way 4 times into the Word of God. The Chaldeans come and they slay. It says in verse 17, they slew young men, young man, virgin, and firm. There's an incredible antithesis here to God. And it says that they do this without compassion. We noticed before God did things because he was compassionate. In the Chaldeans, we see the antithesis. There is no compassion. Verse 18, all the articles from the temple, both small and great. I hope you see the emphasis there. Everything is taken. Treasures from the temple, treasures from the king, treasures from his offices. They're all taken. There's a picture of incredible desolation here before us. It is wiped clean. Like I say, incredibly cataclysmic event. You should think of the prophecy given by Isaiah the prophet in 2 Kings to Hezekiah. That is what happened. That desolation that Isaiah said was coming, here it is, and it has come. The people have been destroyed. I think the Jews probably thought this could never happen. With all the promises that we have of the Lord, we know the true God. This could never happen. Alas and alack, it came. Verse 20, it says, those who had escaped from the sword, he carried to Babylon, and they were servants to him and to his sons until the rule of the kingdom of Persia, to fulfill the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah, until the land enjoyed its Sabbaths. All the days of its desolation it kept Sabbath, until 70 years were complete. We see the king of Persia being brought up here. We will meet him a little bit further on, and we know him to be the man Cyrus. Okay, so the people go into Babylon for 70 years, and of course, we're told here why that they go in for 70 years, of course, and it's because of the Sabbath, or not keeping the Sabbath. We see also a fulfillment of the prophecies of Jeremiah. Jeremiah had told the people, and they had refused to listen. Check out Jeremiah 52, verse 11, where we will tie back. Remember with what Jeremiah had said in 34 about Zedekiah going to Babylon. Check out 52. It says this, and then he blinded the eyes of Zedekiah, the king of Babylon, and bound him with bronze fetters and brought him to Babylon and brought him into the prison until the day of his death. If you remember, it says, you will see the king face to face in Jeremiah. Remember in Ezekiel, it says, you won't see him. We see it happened here. He saw him face to face for a second, and then he didn't see him. Why? His eyes were plucked out. You know what else the king of Babylon did to this king Zedekiah? He took his children and he slayed them in front of him, and then he poked out his eyes. And it says that he died in prison It says that he died in prison. Of course, that prophecy in Jeremiah had also mentioned the fact that he would not die by the sword. In a sense, he died in peace. He died in prison. He didn't die by the sword. Another prophetic word brought in here, Jeremiah chapter 25, verses 11 and 12. It says, then the entire land will become a desolate wasteland. Israel and her neighbors will serve the king of Babylon for 70 years. Then after 70 years of captivity are over, I will punish the king of Babylon and his people for their sins, says the Lord. I will make the country of the Babylonians a wasteland forever. So we see the reason for the exile was because they didn't keep the Sabbath. The Sabbath was a good thing. Leviticus 26 warns them to keep the Sabbath, and they didn't. Remember, if you will, for a second, this Sabbath. I'd like to take it up really quickly here. Remember, if you will, in Genesis, God ceased from his labors on day 7. He ceased from his labors. It's not that God, all-powerful God that he was, that he needed to rest. The idea is more that God stopped. He ceased. And he told the people, on the 7th day, cease from your labors. Stop. We see this in a sense lived out today because we have a 7-day week, do we not? And do we not see on Sundays that there's 6 days we work, and 7th day, hopefully some of us get to rest, to cease from our labors? And so there's something in that for us today, brethren. We are so good at doing things sometimes. So good. In fact, we're probably too good sometimes. But there's the day where we need to cease from our labors, man. We need to stop. There's a verse that I like to quote, or I'd like to think about. It says, if the axe is dull and he does not sharpen its edge, then he must exert more strength. Wisdom has the advantage of giving success. It comes from Ecclesiastes 10:10. If the axe is dull, guess what you need to do? Stop and sharpen it. Sometimes I tell Miss Carol. In fact, I told her the other day. I said, Miss Carol, I'm going to sharpen this saw. She didn't get it. So I said, I'm going to sharpen the axe. I'm going to sharpen the axe. That means I'm going to lunch. If I don't slow down, sharpen the axe first, I'm going to work twice as hard to achieve the same result. Brethren, relax. 7th day the Lord stopped from his labors. Have you stopped from your labors? Is there a day of the week where you stop from your labors a little bit? Put pause. Remember Exodus 20. Remember to keep the Sabbath, keep it holy as unto the Lord. Of course, we see those prophetic words coming to bear here. We don't know what's going on in the future, but we know God is sovereign. We know He knows the future. We see Him working things out to the smallest degree sometimes. Verses 22, it says, "Now in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, in order to fulfill the word of the Lord, by the mouth of Jeremiah, the Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, so that he sent a proclamation throughout his kingdom, and also put it in the writing, saying, 'Thus says Cyrus, king of Persia, the Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he has appointed to me to build him a house in Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Whoever is there among you of all his people, may the Lord God be with you, and may he go up with him, and let him go up with him.'" And so we see Cyrus, the Persian king, what would be modern-day Iran. The Babylonians would be modern-day Iraq. The Babylonians have their time in the sun, and we meet this incredible king, Cyrus. We're going to meet him up again in Ezra as we go forth. He appears in Ezra several times, and he is an incredible figure for several reasons. There are very few non-Jewish or non-Judah or Israelite kings that are mentioned in the Word of God with glowing light, like this guy Cyrus. Check out Isaiah 44, verse 28. It says, "It is I who says of Cyrus, he is my shepherd." Of course, we know shepherd is an image God uses for himself, and even Jesus. "He is my shepherd, and he will perform all my desire, and he declares of Jerusalem, she will be rebuilt, and of the temple your foundation will be laid." Isaiah 45, verse 1 says, "He is my anointed." This is a Persian king. He is my anointed. And so we see at the end of Chronicles, the last few verses here are actually very similar, if not very much the same, as the opening verses of Ezra, verses 1 through 3. Daniel was in Babylon at this time. He realized what was going on because he had read the books and what was going on. We have in Cyrus an incredible deliverer for the people. A guy who doesn't even know the Lord, who wasn't initially part of the Lord's plan. We see Cyrus. Jeremiah chapter 29, verses 10 and 11. I thought I'd best just hit this here because it's such an often quoted verse. This is what the context of the passage is. We're dealing with the texts here, so let's get in there. It says, "For thus says the Lord, when 70 years have been completed for Babylon, I will visit you and fulfill my good word to you to bring you back to this place. For I know the plans that I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare and not for calamity, to give you a future and a hope. And then you will call upon me and come to me and pray, and I will listen to you." If we had stopped the book of Chronicles at the end of verse 21, we would have a very somber text, because it would have ended with the people going into exile with no hope of restoration, with no hope. We see man's failures being the focus of attention, and that's not where it ought to be. Man's failures had brought judgment upon them. They go into exile. If we had stopped there, we'd have missed something really sweet. Verses 23 to 25, through the end of Chronicles, gives us this incredible hope. This incredible graciousness from the Lord. We see it there in Jeremiah 29. "I have good plans for you. I have good things for you." Yes, the people went through an incredibly difficult time. Yes, you and I may go through an incredibly difficult time. But if that covenant is made between you and the Lord by grace through faith in Jesus, those promises are not done. Those prophetic words that he may have given you, just like he gave Isaiah, just like he gave Jeremiah concerning Zedekiah, just like he gave Ezekiel, those prophetic words that he may have given you, brethren, they're not gone. It may be a little bit back there, but the Lord will still bring it to pass. He's brought it to pass here in this guy's life. He can bring it to pass in your life too. I think as we close out Chronicles, we see there's just an incredible measure of grace. The people had failed. Judgment had come. And yet there was still so much grace because of the restoration that was here, that we see through the hand of Cyrus. My grace is sufficient for you, brethren, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Therefore most gladly I will boast in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Therefore I take pleasure in infirmities and reproaches and needs and persecutions and distress for Christ's sake, for when I am weak, then I am strong. My grace is sufficient for you. His grace today is still sufficient for us. It's still sufficient for us. It's still everything that we need. I'll leave you with one last one. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verses 9 and 10. For I am the least of the apostles, and not fit to be called an apostle, because I persecuted the church of God. But by the grace of God I am what I am. And his grace toward me did not prove vain, but I labored even more than all of them. Yet not I, but the grace of God with me. His grace is still with us. Let his grace that he's poured out upon you and me, let it not be in vain. Brethren, on that note, the end of the matter of Chronicles has come. We look forward to Ezra, because there's so much restoration coming. We saw judgment, we saw God's righteousness, we saw his graciousness. We're left on a place with incredible hope at the end of Chronicles, because that's what Chronicles wants us to say. See, you've been through a time of difficulty, but there is hope ahead. If there's something we can pray with you for, please come forward. We'd love to be able to do that for you. It is a grace for us to do that with you. If not, God bless you, and we'll see you when we see you. God willing, that'll be Sunday. Father, thank you for Chronicles. Thank you that you are never done with us. Lord, though there may be difficult things, though there may be times of judgment and failures in our hearts and lives, Lord, still there is grace upon grace measured out toward each one of us. Thank you that your grace is so sufficient. Bless our brothers and sisters in here, Father, we pray. Bless them with your grace. Let your grace work in our hearts and lives. Thank you for the hope that we have in Jesus. Thank you for your prophetic words that you've given to us. Thank you that you performed them, that you didn't leave them unfulfilled. Thank you that you're good to us, Lord. Bless the rest of our evening, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen. If you need prayer, please come forward.